Hey guys, welcome to Middle Class Reactions. Thanks for tuning in today. We're gonna do a kind of an odd turn that is quote unquote the conspiracy rabbit hole. I've been interested in this for a very long time. There's a old Joe Rogan podcast with Tim Kennedy. I cannot stand Tim Kennedy, but he did some cool work on a show called Hunting Hitler, where he went to Argentina, kind of sussing out the theory that Hitler made it out of World War II. Well, the Argentinian president has came out and said he's going to declassify all the documents showing the investigations they've done into the Argentinia's Nazi past. If you don't know, upwards of 5,000 high-ranking, like Third Reich level Nazis fled to Argentina. That's not debated. Everyone knows that. The question is, who all was there? The worst that we know of was, I think, Joseph Mengele. Like, you're talking, like, some of the people who fled to Argentina was, like, the creators of the Holocaust. So this is getting interesting. So, I'm going to start off with saying, is this proven on the Hitler side of things? No. Is it getting very interesting? Yes. And is there a lot of evidence supporting this? Also, yes. So let's take a look.
I think most people know this story and who have studied the subject know that Adolf Hitler didn't kill himself in a bunker in Berlin as the Red Army closed in. I think that's, we all know that was a fabricated story, or if you watch this show, you probably understand that. Hitler actually fled Germany weeks before that using a group of underground tunnels that led to an airstrip. And that airstrip was flown. He was flown from Berlin out. It took submarines, or multiple submarines that were used, U-boats that were then sent to Argentina. In other words, Hitler lived for nearly 2 decades more in Argentina, along with vast numbers of the Third Reich. Well, now Argentinian President Javier Milei has just ordered the release of all remaining documents on all of those Nazis who fled Germany and moved to Argentina after World War II. Basically, it was almost like a second base of operations in Argentina. If you're not familiar with that, like basically the Third Reich operated out of Argentina and Germany. And many of them, including Adolf Hitler, lived in Argentina well after 1945. Most people know that Hitler lived out his days in Bariloche, Argentina, until he died there in the mid-1960s. Yes, you can read the CIA documents about this.
Okay, so the CIA documents he's talking about here, I have looked at. They're open source. They're not hard to find. You don't have to be somebody to get a hold of them. They never confirm it. They hint at it. They talk about sightings of it. They talk about sightings from CIA personnel that have been there, but there's no actual confirmation. There's no actual photo or DNA. Or DNA confirmation that Hitler's actually there. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence. The issue with this is that there's no hard proof. There's no, hey, here's his DNA. Hey, here's a picture. Granted, you're also talking late 1940s to 1960/70 time frame. So, take that for what it is.
The FBI documents also about sightings of Hitler in this area. They knew about it. Of course they knew about it. It was largely facilitated, I think it's safe to say, by the United States and its allies.
And also on that, if you don't think the U.S. would do something like that, you need to look into what is called Unit 731. It's a Japanese book. A lot of people don't. I've dove real deep into the Japanese side of World War II. They were worse than the Nazis, without a doubt. I mean, as far as like what they were doing to people, what they were doing to the Chinese civilians, they were worse than the Nazis on every account. There was a unit they had called Unit 731 that all they did were like Nazi style tests on people. Like, you're talking things that like they would tie a baby on the inside of a dryer and spin it, like turn it on and just let it spin until the baby died, just to see how many RPMs a baby could live at. That's the kind of stuff you're talking about, and that's very like minor compared to some of what they were doing. U.S. found out about it. They had all the heads of the project. They had all the heads of everybody, and they said, "Hey, we'll give you a full pardon if you give us what you found in your research." Because as horrendous as it sounds, there's a lot of things that are found that way that the U.S. can't openly just go do the research on their own, obviously, but they can pardon people who have done that research. The U.S. also did this with a bunch of Nazi scientists. Operation Paperclip. We took the worst Nazis out of the Third Reich that were also super smart because in that period of time, the Nazis were ahead of the game. Just what it was. And the only reason that the U.S. has NASA and the only reason that NASA has been able to do literally anything is because of the Nazis. It's just a odd and uncomfortable reality from history's past.
Operation Paperclip, anybody? Quid.
I haven't watched this. I'm watching this live with you. I haven't watched this yet. But see my point? That's my point.
Pro quo.
Also, if you look into this, the skull that is held in Russia that was supposedly the remains of Adolf Hitler with a bullet wound in it is female.
Yeah.
So when you look for proof that Hitler did in fact kill himself in the bunker, you are going to find a lot of dead ends.
Yeah. And all you need to do.
That is also true. The skull that is supposedly Hitler's, that's still today, I think it's in Russia, that's still today considered Hitler's skull. And this is the big thing they used to prove, like, oh, hey, here was Hitler. Yeah, it's not even a male skull. So take that what you will.
You can read a great book on this called The Gray Wolf. It's a great book. There's many books written about this now. But yeah, the skull, the fragments, they ran the DNA tests on it, and the Soviets allowed them to do this testing. And even Stalin openly talked about that Hitler lived. That he was not there. So Stalin even knew about it. It's widely known in Argentina, by the way, well known that Hitler sired 2 children while he lived in Argentina after the war. 2 girls. Wouldn't that be something to learn where Hitler's children are today? Like Hitler's descendants? That'd be interesting. Maybe we'll learn that in those documents as well. But we'll be watching this story. I'm fascinated. It seems like there's an open era of transparency right now. You might be wondering about the Epstein files. Our friend of the show, Kyle Seraphin, just a few minutes ago dropped a bombshell that he has confirmation from 2 agents who are actively working on the task force inside right now of the DOJ. They have 16 terabytes of data that they're going through right now on these Epstein files, hundreds of child victims. So there's all sorts of hoops and hurdles they have to jump over on all of this, but they're actively working on this, like a task force that's been assigned to deep dive all of the records of Jeffrey Epstein. So what's amazing to me is that during the Biden administration, they were sitting on 16 terabytes of information and files and child victims that they did nothing about. They just sat on this information and did nothing.
Are we shocked about that? Are we shocked that the Biden administration wouldn't want to look into Jeffrey Epstein, who just so happened to be a super friend of Netanyahu?
Till President Trump comes in. So I think there's this era of transparency I'm hoping that we're seeing. Anyway, we'll be following this story.
I think the chat is I didn't know any of this. That's because you didn't marry Clayton Morris and we're not subjected to copious amounts of documentaries about
That's right.
this.
In fact, we reached out to Tim Kennedy, who was on the show. There's a great History Channel show called Hunting Hitler, which looked into a lot of this. But
again, there is a show about it. If you are curious about it, again, I cannot stand Tim Kennedy for other reasons, but he has a episode where he deep dives this on Joe Rogan's podcast from 6 years ago, I think. So, yeah, it'd be worth watching.
But Tim Kennedy, who was a part of that group, we've invited Tim to come on the show, so hopefully he will tomorrow. We'd love to have Tim come on to talk more about this because this is a big story. I think most people, if you go to Grok or if you go to Google's AI, they'll be like, oh, that's been debunked. No, it hasn't. There's actually copious evidence that Hitler never was in Berlin when the Red Army came, and that
it's funny he mentions that. I did go to Grok, not ChatGPT, but Grok, and let me read you exactly what it said here. Can you see it on the screen? Oh yeah, you can see it on the screen. Sweet. So let me scroll up here. Here we go. Did Hitler actually die in World War II? In his bunker here. And if you want to read the full thing here, I'll do this. You can pause it So if you like want to read the full, one sec. Do this for a second. There we go. All right. So if you want to read the full thing, you can do it there. So it's been found that's actually a woman. So, skull fragment you're referring to, a piece with a bullet hole long held in Moscow State Archive and presented as Hitler's, did indeed cause a stir when DNA testing in 09 revealed it belonged to a woman. Okay. Here's what it means. The skull isn't Hitler's. Isn't Hitler's. But that doesn't upend the core evidence of his death. Yes, it does. How would it not? See, this is... Let's see. And Grok is saying that why the mix-up? Soviet was sloppy and secretive. That's the... that's what Grok's saying. So, if you want to go through this, you can. But Grok really doesn't, on this one, really doesn't give anything... Ooh, wrong one. There we go. Really doesn't give anything that's like... So, one sec, guys. There we go. Doesn't give anything that's super... that confirms one way or another, you know? Still goes with the very mainstream thought process behind it, and yeah, you know, think of it what you will. I mean, who knows? No one really knows for sure, like 100% either way. You can take a lot of anecdotal evidence and kind of make a decision one way, or you can go with the normalized consensus from World War II, which I tend to not believe because there's a lot about World War II that is just not true that we've been told about over the last, since World War II. So, and if you want more evidence of any of that, I would say go watch Daryl Cooper's videos on it. It's pretty crazy.
Yes, he did live out his days in Argentina, and it was all well known by the intelligence agencies. So anyway, look it up.
It's pretty well bunked at this point, not debunked.
It is bunked. It's not a debunked. It's not a bunker.
Another point for conspiracy theorists. It's been a good year.
The problem with these huge tech companies is they don't.
Yeah. You're not sponsoring me. Get out of here. If you want to come pay me for an ad, VPN, do it. I need the money.
And I don't know if you have any knowledge of this at all, but yesterday we reported here what Javier Milei, the head of Argentina, of course, is now sort of following a lot of moves on transparency there to release these Nazi documents in Argentina. All of the Nazis that moved to Argentina had set up a base of operations there during World War II. It was almost like another version of Germany in a lot of ways. The Third Reich had set up a major base of operations in Misiones and Bariloche and multiple locations in Argentina. It's widely reported that Hitler survived, did not shoot himself. I don't think anyone really believes that. I certainly don't. And the evidence supports that he went to Argentina and lived out his days into the 1960s. So these documents that Argentina is about to release, what are you hoping you'll see? Is there anything there that stands out to you that you're looking at as a historian?
Yeah, and interestingly enough, that's having been involved with way too many subjects over the decades.
I don't know why. That is not what I thought he would sound like. Mountain View, Oklahoma. That's not too far from where I grew up. Huh.
I suppose, yeah. Very familiar with the so-called rat lines that took Nazis of all types, a lot of SS, but also a lot of scientists into Argentina. And I mean, amazingly, you find things like Argentina starting its own fusion nuclear program with Nazi scientists that had been working on atomic research in Germany. But the other thing you find is that the CIA had convinced themselves that a great number of these former Nazis from the intelligence community, from the SS, not just the scientists. We tend to think that they just brought the rocket scientist over, but they didn't. They brought a lot of intelligence people, but they didn't bring them directly from Europe. They kind of enabled them getting to Argentina, and then they recruited them from Argentina into the U.S. And if you really want the full story of what evolved with the intelligence network and to some extent why the intelligence network became so obsessed with communist operating, immediately prior to the end of the war, a lot of that influence came from these Nazis, who, of course, had been fighting communism as much as anything else. And
Right.
they had a major influence inside the American intelligence community. It would be great to see exactly how those ties evolve. We know they're there, but again, the
Yeah.
devil is always in the details. Who and when? Timing is especially critical.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would like more information about Operation Paperclip and how many of the Nazis held real positions of power inside the United States. Americans might be shocked to learn that. I hope we learn some of that in these documents. Larry, great to see you. The book is called The Oswald Puzzle. I know you're knee deep in documents right now, going through all of this. I hope you'll come back on the show with more revelations that we can talk about here on Redacted. Thank you so much, Larry.
Would love to. Thanks for having me.
So yeah, guys, that's wild. Yeah, so that's that. That's what we're looking at. So we'll see what comes out. This is another one I'm going to be following. Have a list going now of different stuff I'm keeping an eye on. But yeah, I would not be shocked to figure out that Hitler was alive till the 60s or 70s. That would not shock me at all. If he died on some beach somewhere in Argentina, wouldn't shock me even a little bit. He died in his old age with kids and some grandkids. Wouldn't shock me. But yeah, if anything new comes to that, I'll be doing a video on it. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things you need to. Have a great rest of your weekend, and let's get ready for the week. Have a good day.